Hey guys, my name is Mr. Mrrboss and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in this video, I'm basically going to be teaching you guys how you can write for loops and how you can use them in your day-to-day programming life. And hopefully you're going to learn something. Hopefully you're going to manage to understand what I'm going to be teaching you. If you don't understand, don't worry, just go back, rewatch the video, and hopefully by the time you rewatch it over and over, you'll be understanding everything properly. All right, so without wasting time, let me just basically go to my code blocks over here, which I'm going to be using the IDE that I'm going to be using for this tutorial. Okay, so let's just do this. Create a new project. I've shown you guys how you can basically follow how you can create a new project on code blocks. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with all these steps that I'm basically doing here. So I'm just going to say for loops, say finish. Okay. All right, so so the first thing first is when you're dealing with for loops, I just want to help you guys understand what for loops are and how you can use them. So for loops are basically, like it says, it's a loop that basically has certain conditions that needs to be followed when executed. For instance, when you're writing a for loop, the syntax for it is obviously you need to write the for, and then inside the parentheses, inside the opening and closing brackets, you need to basically put your parentheses, parameters inside. So inside the parentheses, you put the parameters. So what are those parameters? The parameters are, so first thing first, you're going to put the initial statement, and then you separate the first, the initial statement and the second condition with a semicolon. You don't put a comma. If you put a comma, it's going to give you errors. So I'm going to show you an example where I'm going to use a comma, and then from there, I'm sure you're going to see that, okay, fine. With a comma, you get a lot of problems. So you put a semicolon, and then the next thing is you put the loop condition. You put the loop condition, right? And then you separate it with a semicolon again. And the last but not least is the update statement. Update statement. Sorry about that. The update statement. That is the third thing. And then from there, just like the way you have been writing functions, that is the same way that you're going to be writing a for loop. The only difference is that with your for loop, it has these three parameters inside your parentheses, whereas a function can have those or could not have. A for loop needs to have those parameters in order for it to function. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So that is the difference that you would have when you're dealing with the function. So next thing, like I said, you put your opening and closing braces. Inside the braces, obviously that this is where you're going to be writing your statements. This is where you're going to be writing your statements / instructions. Instructions which you basically wish to be executed. All right. So this is where you write your instructions / statements, which you want your program to execute. And then from there, this is what basically forms our for loop. All right. So one thing that I want to highlight is that, when it comes to programming, everything builds up into a single unit, a single entity. So the first thing that I want to highlight is the fact that when you're programming, if you're going to be using for loops, you can or might as well use what we call if statements, which I've explained in the previous videos, if else statements and if statements. So if you do not understand or do not know what I'm talking about, then I would advise you to just get back to the previous tutorials, which I have included in this series, and I'm sure you'll be understanding if statements and if else statements thereafter. If you still don't understand, what you can simply do is you can simply leave a comment in the comment section below, and I'm gonna attend to it. So like I said, you can use if statements inside your for loops. And yeah, so I'm gonna give an example. I'm just gonna erase all this because obviously you guys don't need this. You really need to understand the application process of for loops. On the initial statement over here, you need to put the initial statement, obviously, like it's saying. And this is basically going to be my initial statement. You need to first write the data type. And then after writing the data type, of which I want this to be an integer, then you need to give your variable. So it's basically creating a variable that you're going to be initializing to 0, right? Or to 1, or whatever value you want to initialize it to. So this is, in simple terms, this is a starting point for your for loop. So if your for loop, you want it to run from 1 until 10, then basically you need to make sure that your initial value is a 1. If you want it to run from 5 until 10, or 5 until 20, or 5 until 1, then you need to make sure that your initial value is a 5. So in this case, I want it to run from 0 until 10. So I want my for loop to basically output values starting from 0 until 10. So in order for me to do that, obviously, like I said, you need to write the data type, and then afterwards you need to basically write the name of your variable. And in this case, I'm going to equate this to 0 because I want this to be my initial or my starting point. And then afterwards, I need my loop condition. So my loop condition, I'm just going to say I is less than or equals to 10, right? So this is basically telling my program that it's going to start from 0, which is the initial part, and then it's going to run until 10 over here. And then afterwards, it's going to terminate. It's going to stop. It's going to break, basically. And then afterwards, of which later on in another tutorial, I'm going to explain in terms of what if you basically do not know the endpoint. Like, what if you don't know the endpoint? Then I'm going to explain that. And then afterwards, the third thing that you need to include in order for your for loop to basically work is your update statement. And in terms of the update statement, it's basically where you can use, if you wanted to start from 5 to 1, you basically use a decrement. If you wanted to start from 1 until 10, then you basically use the increment. In this case, I wanted to start from 0 until 10, therefore I'm going to be using an increment. What is an increment? You basically write your variable that you have created in the initial condition, and then I'm going to increment it by using the plus plus. So every time you need to increment something, you just use the plus plus. Of course, you can increment in 2s, you can increment in 3s, 10s, whatever the case might be. But in this case, I just want it to count from 1 until 10. So I just want it to increment in the sequence of adding a 1 to the previous value. So in this case, it's going to say 0, and then it's going to add 1 to 0. It's going to add another 1 to 1, and then it's just going to count from 0 until 10. All right. So this is what you have inside. This is what we call our parameters inside our parentheses. The next thing, I'm going to move forward, and then I'm going to create my statements. So inside my statements, I'm basically going to be writing something so basic, whereby I'm going to say cout, because this has to be as basic as possible. Cout I, right? And then let's just do this, cout I, and then outside my for loop, I can say cout endline, right? So this is a very nice way of writing this. So the next thing that I can do just to make my code neat, I can say cin dot get with parentheses over there, and then put a semicolon just to make my work neater. All right, so if I run this program, let's see what it's going to do. So I'm just going to build and run. Oh, so it's saying there's an error here. Okay, so there was a mistake. I mistakenly added a braces, an opening braces over there. So if I run it now, let's see what it's going to do. Okay, so it outputted our values from 0 until 10, but as you can see, there is really not, there isn't spacing. Even though our program works, there isn't any spacing over here. So in order for me to fix that, I'm going to show you how you can do that. But in this case, I want to talk about the reason why there's nothing right under here. The reason for that is it's because of the get line over here. I did explain the function of the get line and how you can basically, yeah, and I explained everything with regards to the cin.get, not get line, I mean. Excuse me for that. I explained the cin.get in detail in the previous tutorials. So if you feel like you're confused about what's going on, you can simply visit them, and trust me, you're going to understand things better. So now let's resolve the issue whereby we have 0 until 10, but there's no spacing in between. It's just like that. So I'm gonna do one thing for myself. I'm gonna remove the C out over here, and then I'm gonna come here and let's try to add this end line right here, and let's see what that is gonna do, right? So let's run this program, and then let's see what it's gonna output. So now we can see that it's 0 until 10, right, below one another, and there's also spacing between, of which if I want to increase the amount of spacing, then what I can simply do is I can do something like what? Let's see. If I do something like, let's just increase the spacing to that. Let's run this program and let's see what it's going to do, right? Okay, so the spacing is still the same, meaning that what I can do next, let's see. Let me remove this. Then let me just do this. Then I'm gonna have C out line over here. Let me run this program. Let's see what we got. Okay, now we have them in a horizontal manner, of which the spacing in between has increased, of which is the thing that I was looking for in the first place. I want them in a horizontal manner, and I want them to have space in between, of which if I do remove this over here, if I just cut this and then I run my program, then you are gonna witness that basically everything is so squashed and stuff like that. But the main purpose of this loop is it generated values. It basically outputted values starting from 0 until 10, of which 0 was my initial point, and then the 10 was basically the endpoint. So this is basically how you can use for loops in terms of writing program and stuff like that. But remember, I also mentioned that you can also include what you call if statements inside your for loop. You can include if statements, you can include if else statements. And also one important thing that I want to highlight is the fact that you can also put all this inside a function. So if you can just cut this, and then if you can come below here or on top, and then create functions as I've shown you in the previous videos, then I'm sure it's just gonna make sense. So in this case, I'm not gonna show you how to create functions, but you can basically have everything that I've just removed here. All this, you can have it inside a function, and yeah, it makes your code look neater and much more professional. Later on in the videos, I'm gonna explain how you can use other methods in terms of making your code look much more professional, neater. But in terms of this video, thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate you. In the next video, I'm going to be explaining how you can write while loops, and hopefully you guys are going to watch the next video, and hopefully you guys are enjoying my series. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.